I want to give you 4 basic tips for reading older literature, especially the kind of works that we have in units 1 through 4, which are all from older forms of English and are difficult to people who were born speaking or raised speaking in modern English or learned modern English as an additional language. The first 3 are kind of general lessons. The fourth is about how the English language worked before 1800 specifically. First, don't panic. If it seems difficult, that's because it's a dialect that you're not familiar with. Stop thinking about whether or not you are smart enough or not smart enough to read it. Nobody has ever been born smart enough to understand a dialect that they were not raised in or have never been previously exposed to. Nobody opens Chaucer the first time and gets it all. Everybody learns it through practice. Thanks. Okay. You will get better over time. Don't quit. Don't panic. Second, it's going to take more time. Yes, this sounds like some of what I said about the Fairy Queen. It is especially true of the Fairy Queen, but it's true for all these works. Slow down. If it's more complicated, if it's a little puzzling, if there's some things that have changed, you need to take a little extra time and allow yourself some extra time. And yes, I know it's only 6 weeks, and I know almost every course at Cleveland State feels a little rushed because you have so many other things going on, but you need to take the time, slow down so you can understand it. Look, you can rush through it, you can just run your eyes over the words and not get anything, or you can read slowly, understanding more as you go, and get more practice. One outcome is a lot better. The third thing I'd say, and I did hint at this in the, I also suggested this specifically for the Fairy Queen, but it goes for Shakespeare and Chaucer and Milton too. Read it out loud. It's poetry. It's meant to sound, it's written for its sound. It's meant to be spoken aloud. Hamlet particularly is meant to be performed out loud, and it can make more sense when you say it. I know, finding a private place to read out loud can be tricky, but it can be worth the investment. Give it a shot. At least try reading at least some of it out loud some of the time. Now, let me get those 3 tips out of the way. Let me get to a very specific tip about the history of English. Look for the verb. I know many of you think that you're having trouble understanding these works because of the unfamiliar vocabulary. And some of the vocabulary is unfamiliar. But let me suggest humbly, that is not the main problem. That is actually not what's tripping you up. If vocabulary were the real problem, then the little notes on the side of the page in the margin that explain what these words mean should clarify everything and make it very transparent. And they help, but they don't solve the whole problem. Now, do they? There is unfamiliar vocabulary. There is some unfamiliar grammar, even more unfamiliar grammar with Chaucer, but still real grammar that we don't use as much more. That grammatical constructions we've either lost in spoken English or simply choose not to use much anymore, and so they can throw people. Those are there. Vocabulary and grammar are real issues. But what's throwing you most of all is not the words. It is the word order. It is the syntax. The words are not coming in the order you expect, and this is what's throwing you off. Trust me. English, as we speak it today in the 21st century, is what the linguists call a stereotyped word order language. We know what each word in a sentence is doing because of when it comes. First comes the subject, then comes the verb, and then sometimes comes an object, another noun. There comes a noun, there comes a verb, there's another noun or nouns. And we know that first noun does whatever thing the verb describes to the nouns that come after it, in sequence just like that. And that system works for us fine. It is a way to organize a language, but it is by no means the only way to organize a language. There are many other languages which basically code the words themselves, change or mutate the words, the ending, sometimes the beginning, sometimes the stem. in order to encode what part of speech it is and what it's doing in the sentence. And then you can use it in any order. There are languages with flexible word orders. English used to be one of them. Old English, by which I mean Anglo-Saxon, which I mean up till the 11th century, the stuff I read you, the stuff I showed you with a little bit of Beowulf, was a flexible word order language where nouns had cases and you know where the subject was and where the object was because the nouns changed to identify themselves as the subject of the sentence. So you could put them in any order you wanted. Latin is also a flexible word order language where the words themselves change so you can put them in any order. In modern English, you would say, Marcus killed Julius. In Latin, you can say, Marcus killed Julius. You can say, Marcus Julius killed. You can say, Julius Marcus killed. And it all means the same thing because you change the words Marcus and Julius to tell you who killed. Instead of putting them in a specific place, you change the word ending to tell you who's doing what. What does all this have to do with us? English used to be a flexible word order language. It isn't now. Chaucer, Spenser, Shakespeare, and Milton occupy a kind of middle space where the word order hasn't stopped being super flexible, but there's still a lot of flexibility there, so you can move that stuff around to some degree. And poets will also hang on to this flexibility a little longer than everyday language can, because a poet will take as much because poets will hang on to all the flexibility they can, because they got a rhyme scheme to work out and meter and all, and they want to work some imagery in. They need all the flex they can get. Also, not for nothing, all four of these writers have been educated more or less extensively, maybe Shakespeare the least, Milton definitely the most, in Latin, which is another flexible word order language. So they write their poetry in a flexible word order. The verb isn't where you think it is. The subject of the sentence isn't where you think it is. Sometimes you have to do a little jumble unscramble with these sentences, but it's worth it. If you don't know what's happening in a sentence, stop and see what happens if you move the main words around. Find the verb that's most important, then find the subject of the sentence. Really, it's syntax that's throwing you off. This seems all incredibly difficult. You get used to it. It becomes a habit you build over practice.